He went from one of YouTube's most iconic pranksters, raking in millions of views and thriving on chaos, to now sitting behind bars in one of the most notorious jails in the world. Vitali's life, once a roller coaster of fame, money, and outrageous stunts, has spiraled dramatically into a nightmare he may never escape. But how did this prankster, who once seemed untouchable, end up trapped halfway across the world, abandoned by everyone and despised by millions? The story you're about to hear isn't just another tale of a YouTuber gone wrong. It's a shocking warning about what happens when chasing clicks goes way too far and the devastating consequences of believing you're above the law. Before everything came crashing down, Vitali wasn't just another prankster, he was a full-blown internet phenomenon. At the height of his success, he was pulling tens of millions of views on nearly every upload, dominating YouTube's trending page with a brand built entirely on shock, chaos, and controversy. He didn't just play with boundaries, he shattered them. And in the early 2010s, when YouTube was still finding its identity, that kind of behavior didn't just go viral, it made you a star. Vitali's breakout moment came with the Miami zombie attack prank, a video that instantly rocketed him into the spotlight, but not for the reasons you'd hope. In the prank, Vitali dressed up as a zombie and charged at unsuspecting people in Miami, filming their terrified reactions. What made it so controversial was its timing. Just days before, a horrifying real-life attack had taken place in the same city. Rudy Eugene had violently assaulted a homeless man, gnawing off most of his face in an event so gruesome it made global headlines. And while the city was still in shock, Vitali seized the moment. He weaponized fear for content, capitalizing on public trauma to spark panic and rack up views. And it worked. The video spread like wildfire, igniting outrage and fascination in equal measure. It was disturbing, it was tasteless, but it was undeniably viral. For Vitali, it was proof that the more offensive and unpredictable the content, the faster the internet would eat it up. But that prank didn't just make him famous. It set the blueprint for everything that followed. From that moment on, Vitali understood that controversy was currency. Pain, fear, and social boundaries weren't lines to respect, they were buttons to press for engagement. And as the subscribers poured in, he convinced himself that the ends always justified the means. What started as edgy entertainment quickly spiraled into something darker. A full-blown addiction to going viral at any cost. And unknown to him, every click, every reaction, every outrageous moment was leading him one step closer to disaster. As Vitali's fame grew, so did his appetite for attention, and simple pranks were no longer enough. He didn't just want views, he wanted headlines. He wanted to dominate the conversation, no matter what it took. So he started turning real-world locations into personal stages, pulling off massive stunts that blurred the line between viral content and criminal activity. One of his most infamous moves came in 2014 during the FIFA World Cup final, the most watched sporting event on Earth. As the entire globe tuned in to see Germany face Argentina, Vitali stormed the pitch in front of tens of thousands of fans and millions more watching from home. He wasn't just there to cause a scene, he was promoting himself, proudly flashing a message for his YouTube channel across his bare chest. What should have been a moment of global sports history was hijacked for clout, and the world noticed. But rather than facing lasting consequences, Vitali walked away with a slap on the wrist and a massive spike in subscribers, and that was all he needed. He now believed arrests weren't setbacks, they were fuel. Each one added to his legend. Each time he crossed the line, he'd get more press, more fans, more momentum. The formula was simple: break the rules, pay the fine, go viral. In 2016, he took things further by scaling the iconic Hollywood sign in Los Angeles, one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world. Vitali climbed all the way up to the top, waving a giant flag that read "I'm back," just to announce his return to YouTube. Law enforcement didn't see it as a clever marketing stunt. He was arrested on the spot, but Vitali treated it like a victory lap. His stunt made the evening news. The footage spread across social media like wildfire, and to his fans, it only added to his mythos. Over the next few years, these headline-grabbing acts became routine. He ran onto the court during the 2016 NBA Finals. He stormed the field again at the 2017 World Series. He made public spaces his playground and treated the law like it didn't apply to him. In Vitali's world, there were no consequences, only more content, but while his stunts grew bolder, they also became more desperate. With every act of defiance, the gap between fame and infamy narrowed. What once looked like fearless entertainment began to look more like reckless obsession. He wasn't just entertaining an audience anymore, he was feeding a monster. And somewhere along the way, Vitali stopped being in control of the spectacle. The spectacle started controlling him, and with each new risk, he inched closer to the one line he could never uncross, the moment where his next big stunt wouldn't make him a star, it would make him a criminal. For years, Vitali built a brand around being real. That was part of his appeal. Raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically bold. His fans believed they were watching someone fearless and genuine, someone who didn't fake reactions or stage scenes for clicks. But in 2018, that image shattered almost overnight. It all started when Vitali's former friend and fellow YouTuber FauciTube turned on him publicly. In a series of explosive rants, Fauci accused Vitali of faking his pranks from the very beginning, calling him a fraud and exposing how many of his spontaneous viral hits were carefully choreographed. And worse yet, Fauci claimed that Vitali was the one who taught him how to fake pranks in the first place. At first, Vitali tried to deflect. He played it off, dismissed the drama as jealousy or clout chasing. But when fans began digging deeper and comparing footage, the truth became undeniable. Vitali had no choice but to admit it. Yes, many of his most iconic videos were staged. The Russian hitman prank, scripted. The bomb scare, faked. The woman abuse in public social experiment, completely orchestrated. This was a turning point, not just for his channel, but for his legacy. Everything he had built, everything he had claimed to stand for, was suddenly in question. The outrage was immediate. Viewers who had once idolized him now felt duped. And for Vitali, it marked the beginning of a slow, painful unraveling. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Around that same period, YouTube's infamous adpocalypse was in full swing. After Logan Paul's disastrous trip to Japan, the platform cracked down hard, demonetizing controversial content and tightening the rules. Prank channels, once the golden children of YouTube, were suddenly blacklisted, their videos stripped of ads and pushed out of the algorithm. For creators like Vitali, whose income relied almost entirely on views and monetization, it was a death sentence. Overnight, Vitali's channel went from a thriving empire to a struggling mess. Views dropped. Revenue dried up. The platform that once elevated him to internet royalty had now turned its back. And with YouTube no longer a reliable source of income, Vitali began looking for alternatives. Fast. In late 2018, he launched a subscription-based adult content website. Promising unfiltered, outrageous, and too hot for YouTube material, he marketed it as his rawest, edgiest work yet. But he didn't stop there. He turned his own loved ones into tools for shock value. In one of the most bizarre and disturbing stunts of his career, he convinced his girlfriend to streak during the UEFA Champions League final. The same year, he upped the ante again, this time with his own mother streaking at the Cricket World Cup, with the name of his website plastered across her clothing. To most people, it was unthinkable. To Vitali, it was just marketing. But the gambit failed. Despite the headlines and attention, the website flopped miserably. Subscriptions tanked, the platform was quietly shut down, and Vitali never mentioned it again. He had crossed nearly every line imaginable. Family, public decency, ethics, all in the name of clout, and it still wasn't enough. At this point, it was clear Vitali wasn't chasing fame anymore. He was chasing a high. The high of relevance, the thrill of outrage, the belief that no matter how far he fell, he could always come back. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling. His videos were losing steam, his antics were becoming tired, and for the first time in his career, the audience was starting to look away. And that's when the spiral truly began. Because without the internet's applause, Vitali had no brakes, no guide, no reason to stop. For years, Vitali's brand was chaos. He had built his entire identity on recklessness, testing boundaries, provoking strangers, and turning public space into a stage. But what made his content thrilling to some also masked a darker truth. He was spiraling. Behind the wild pranks and smug camera grins, his personal life was deteriorating fast. And in 2020, that chaos finally burst into the real world, with devastating consequences. On the morning of April 12, 2020, a disturbing 911 call was placed in a quiet Miami neighborhood. A witness, panicked and breathless, reported a man viciously attacking a woman in the street. The description was graphic: punches to the face, screams, blood. And by the time officers arrived, they realized this wasn't some unknown threat. It was Vitali. According to the police report, Vitali had taken a dangerously high dose of psychedelic mushrooms. The drugs triggered intense hallucinations, causing him to completely disconnect from reality. He stumbled out of his home and spotted a female jogger. Without warning, he ran up, tackled her to the ground, and began violently punching her in the face and chest. The attack was brutal. The woman suffered a deep gash above her eye, multiple facial injuries, and a complete emotional breakdown. Vitali was immediately arrested and charged with aggravated assault, but for once, this wasn't a headline he could spin into content. The media coverage was relentless. The internet, once amused by his antics, turned on him with a fury. Former fans expressed horror and disbelief, shocked that someone they once laughed with could do something so violent and senseless. Even worse, this time the consequences were real and inescapable. The victim filed a civil lawsuit against him and won, and the court ordered Vitali to pay over $155,000 in damages, a financial blow that was only part of the larger cost. His reputation, already fragile, was now in ruins. No amount of apologies could erase the images, the reports, the victim's story. He wasn't a prankster anymore. He was someone capable of real harm. And then, silence. After the incident, Vitali disappeared. No uploads, no streams, no updates. For nearly 2 years, he vanished from the public eye entirely. Fans speculated, was he in rehab? Jail? Had he finally quit for good? Some hoped he'd reemerge a changed man. Others believed the story was over, but what no one knew was that Vitali wasn't done. Not even close, because while the world saw a man broken by consequence, Vitali saw something else, a chance for reinvention, a comeback, a way to reclaim the spotlight. And when he finally returned, it would be clear that the lesson hadn't sunk in. If anything, he was ready to double down on the chaos, no matter who got hurt next. After nearly 2 years of silence, Vitali re-emerged in July 2022, posting a somber video on Facebook. His tone was subdued, his voice cracked, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't hiding behind a prank or a viral stunt. He spoke openly about his past, admitting to substance abuse, reckless behavior, and the destruction he had caused in both his personal life and his career. He apologized to his fans, to those he hurt, and to the people he had let down. It felt at first like a turning point. He said the right things, how fame had gotten to his head, how drugs and alcohol had taken control, how he had surrounded himself with toxic influences. There was remorse in his words and even a promise that he was coming back not to shock but to inspire. For many, this seemed like the redemption arc they had been waiting for. A fresh start, a clean slate. But words are easy, and actions speak louder. Over the following months, Vitali began uploading again. At first, his content leaned into positivity and self-improvement, but the views didn't follow. Videos that once pulled in tens of millions now struggled to break 100,000. For someone who had built his identity on being viral, the drop in relevance hit hard. The comments were brutal. People didn't see a reformed creator. They saw a has-been desperately trying to force a comeback in a world that had moved on, and that's when the mask started to slip. Slowly, his content crept back toward what had once made him infamous. He began revisiting his old tricks. Awkward confrontations, public disturbances, inappropriate jokes, hoping to reignite the same spark. But it didn't work. The internet landscape had changed. Prank culture was dying, and what used to be edgy now came off as stale, forced, even sad. He wasn't ahead of the curve anymore, he was behind it, chasing ghosts. With YouTube offering diminishing returns, Vitali jumped ship. In early 2023, he joined Kick, a fast-growing streaming platform that embraced the kind of raw, unscripted content that would have gotten him demonetized on YouTube in seconds. It was the perfect environment for someone like him. No filters, no boundaries, no rules. And so, Vitali reinvented himself as an IRL streamer. Armed with a camera and a live audience, he took to the streets once again. But this time, there were no edits, no safety nets. Viewers saw the real Vitali in real time. And what they saw wasn't evolution, it was regression. He wandered public spaces, harassing strangers, baiting reactions, and provoking confrontations for the sake of content. If someone pushed back, even better. Conflict equaled views. But the magic was gone. What once seemed bold now felt pathetic. His most loyal fans began to slip away, uncomfortable with what he had become. New viewers didn't care about his past fame. They only saw a man chasing relevance with increasingly desperate antics. And beneath the surface, it was obvious this wasn't a rebirth, it was a meltdown playing out live, one awkward encounter at a time. The sad irony, in trying to stage a comeback, Vitali revealed just how far he had truly fallen. He wasn't evolving, he was stuck, spinning in circles, repeating the same formula that had already destroyed him once, only now, the audience wasn't laughing. They were watching a train wreck, waiting to see how much worse it could get. And unfortunately for Vitali, it was about to get much worse. By 2024, Vitali was running out of options. YouTube had turned its back on him, his IRL streams were struggling to gain traction, and every attempt at reinvention had failed. But just when it seemed like his career was fully dead, he found a new angle, one that was equal parts shocking and strategic. He leaned into a rising trend that was dominating the internet: predator hunting. Across platforms like YouTube, Rumble, and Kick, a new breed of creators had begun conducting sting operations on suspected predators, posing as underage decoys, luring men into meetups, and then exposing them live on camera. These creators were blowing up, racking up millions of views by confronting their targets in real time. The formula was irresistible to viewers: real danger, real consequences, and real humiliation. It was vigilante justice wrapped in viral spectacle. Vitali saw an opportunity and jumped in headfirst. He launched his own series of live predator stings, filming confrontations in graphic, dramatic fashion. He didn't just call people out, he embarrassed them, berated them, and punished them on stream. Sometimes he'd force them to shave their heads. Other times he'd coerce them into bizarre, on-the-spot challenges, all while shouting catchphrases and stirring up his audience. It was loud, intense, chaotic, exactly the kind of content he was known for. And it worked. The internet took notice of Five Fast. Within weeks, his Kick channel was surging with new followers. He collaborated with high-profile names like Aiden Ross and boxer Ryan Garcia, lending an air of legitimacy to the spectacle. In one stream, he even got Akon to perform his hit song Locked Up while a predator was being publicly humiliated, blurring the line between content and cruelty in real time. For Vitali, it felt like a rebirth. The views were back, the fame was returning, and the chaos had a purpose again. Or so it seemed. But the cracks were already forming. As the streams gained traction, observant viewers started asking tough questions. Why weren't the police ever involved? Why were these so-called predators being shamed on camera without any legal follow-up? Unlike other well-known predator hunters, like Skeeter Jean, G-Dun, or predator poachers, Vitali almost never called the authorities. There were no arrests, no investigations, no formal handoffs, just confrontations, insults, and live stream hype. It quickly became clear that these stings weren't about justice at all. They were about entertainment. The predators were props, the crimes were backdrops, and the real star of the show, as always, was Vitali himself. To make matters worse, he began promoting gambling sponsorships midstream, even in the middle of confronting suspects. In one particularly jarring clip, while standing face-to-face with a terrified man being accused of horrific intentions, Vitali pulled out his phone, opened a gambling app, and asked his viewers to guess a number. Click it, he shouted. Let's cash out, baby. The man being confronted stood there awkwardly, half exposed, half confused, while Vitali raked in money and views. At that point, the message was loud and clear. This wasn't about protecting anyone. It was about monetizing pain and exploiting outrage. What should have been a serious conversation about child safety had become a circus, with Vitali once again at the center ring. Critics came flooding in. Advocacy groups, legal experts, and even some of his own fans started turning on him. They questioned the ethics of staging confrontations without legal follow-through, the danger of falsely accusing someone live, and the psychological impact of turning justice into performance. And yet Vitali pressed on because in his mind it was working. He was back in the spotlight, the numbers were rising, and for a man who equated relevance with self-worth, that was all that mattered. But behind the scenes, tension was growing. Other creators in the space began distancing themselves. The public's fascination with the stream started shifting into discomfort. And just like every other chapter in his career, Vitali didn't know when to stop. He had taken a real-world issue, weaponized it for content, and inflated his ego on the back of human suffering. And once again, he was skating on thin ice. Only this time, the cracks were deeper and the fall would be harder. Because while he was busy chasing viral glory again, Vitali had no idea that his next move across the world would trigger a backlash so massive, it wouldn't just end his career, it would end his freedom. By early 2025, the predator hunting streams were losing steam. The novelty was wearing off, the backlash was growing louder, and even Vitali's most outrageous stunts weren't delivering the numbers they once did. But in typical Vitali fashion, he wasn't about to walk away quietly. Instead, he planned what he believed would be his boldest, most profitable reinvention yet, streaming his chaotic lifestyle abroad. Travel IRL content was exploding at the time. Streamers like iShowSpeed were raking in millions by documenting their adventures in foreign countries. There was drama, culture clash, and endless opportunities to go viral with little effort. To Vitali, this wasn't just a trend, it was a lifeline. If domestic chaos no longer shocked viewers, maybe international chaos would. On March 27, 2025, he touched down in the Philippines, a country known for its rich culture, tight-knit communities, and deep pride in national identity. At first, things didn't seem so bad. In one of his early streams, he donated printers and computers to less fortunate locals. The tone was surprisingly wholesome, and for a brief moment, some viewers thought this might actually be the rebirth Vitali had promised. But the peace didn't last. Within days, he launched a new stream titled "Disturbing the Peace in the Philippines." And just like that, the mask slipped. Gone was the humble Vitali seeking redemption. In his place was the same old instigator, rude, aggressive, and completely out of touch with his surroundings. He began harassing locals in public, asking invasive, sexually charged questions to random women, making crude jokes in broken English, and mocking people's appearances for laughs. At one point, he asked a married man if his wife could help relieve him, and later joked about his PP not going down due to excitement. What he saw as harmless trolling, locals saw as disgusting, disrespectful, and deeply offensive. Then it got worse. He started targeting security guards, mocking them, trying to grab their radios, yelling at them in public. When those encounters didn't generate strong enough reactions, he escalated again. During one stream, he attempted to steal a parked motorcycle in broad daylight, joking as he sped off, only stopping when the owner gave chase. In another clip, he stole a fan from a restaurant and taunted the staff by calling it his only fan, since he had fallen off. Then he grabbed a light fixture from a shop, laughing as he walked out without paying. To top it off, in one of the most disturbing moments caught live, he approached an elderly woman and said, "Madam, I'm going to rob you if you keep walking away." When she clearly became frightened, he tried to backpedal by offering her money, mocking her for wearing a mask and calling her a liberal. What to him was just content, was to everyone else an outright assault on a peaceful community. Still, Vitali seemed completely convinced he was untouchable. He believed that his fame, his audience, and his money would once again shield him from consequences. After all, it had worked before. Egypt, Brazil, Germany, the US. Every time he got arrested or banned, he turned it into a badge of honor. He had outrun accountability so many times that he'd come to believe it was part of the game. But the Philippines wasn't playing games. Word of his behavior began spreading fast. Clips were posted all over Filipino Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. The reactions were immediate and furious. Hashtags began trending. News outlets picked up the story. What he thought was just another edgy stunt had now turned into a full-blown national scandal. In the middle of it all, another travel vlogger known as Unlock Philippines tried to step in. He confronted Vitali during a stream, pleading with him to respect the country and its people. He spoke calmly but firmly, warning that Filipinos don't take kindly to being mocked or used as props for content. "You have power," he told him. "Why not use it to lift someone up instead of tearing them down?" But Vitali laughed in his face, mocked him, and even threatened to physically assault him on camera. "You touch me, and I'll knock you the fuck out," he barked. The moment was a turning point. It showed the world that Vitali wasn't misunderstood or misled. He was fully aware of what he was doing and had no intention of stopping. To him, disrespect was the brand, controversy was the business model, and as the views came pouring in from a new wave of angry watchers, he believed it was working. But what he didn't realize was that, for the first time in his career, he had crossed a line that no amount of views could save him from. The Philippine government was watching. The public was outraged, and the countdown to his arrest had already begun. Vitali thought he could treat another country like a stage, but this time the curtain was about to come crashing down. On April 2nd, 2025, just days after his chaotic live streams had flooded Filipino social media, Vitali's reckless run came to an abrupt and dramatic end. He was arrested in public by officers from the Philippine National Police, and this time, it wasn't a prank, it wasn't staged, and it wasn't for content. Cameras didn't capture him grinning like he usually did in mugshots. There were no viral "I'll be back" posts. What viewers saw instead was something entirely new. Vitali, handcuffed, confused, and clearly panicked. The show was finally over. The charges stacked up quickly. Authorities hit him with counts of theft, public misconduct, unjust vexation, and unauthorized video recording, all based on evidence he had provided himself through his own live streams. What made this arrest different from all the others in his past was that there was no quick release, no wink to the camera afterward. This time, the government was serious, and they made that very clear. Just 5 days later, Vitali was paraded in front of national media alongside Secretary of the Interior Benjamin Abalos Jr., who publicly denounced his behavior in a press conference broadcast across the country. Flanked by police officers and visibly restrained, Vitali looked nothing like the smug provocateur fans remembered. Abalos made one thing crystal clear: this wasn't going to be brushed under the rug. He announced that Vitali would not be deported, he would be prosecuted under Philippine law and made an example of. The time when foreigners could just disrespect Filipinos is over, he stated firmly. For a man who had been slipping past consequences for over a decade, the message hit hard. This wasn't just another stunt gone too far. It was an international incident, and the fallout was just beginning. Almost immediately, Vitali's legal team reached out to both of his home countries, the United States and Russia, seeking diplomatic assistance or intervention, but shockingly, both governments refused to help. The U.S. Embassy declined to intervene, citing the need to respect Philippine sovereignty and local laws. And in a move that stunned even his harshest critics, the Russian ambassador publicly declared that Vitali would receive no consular aid from Moscow, stating he is on his own. With no legal escape route, and both of his countries refusing to pull strings, Vitali found himself completely alone, something he had likely never experienced in his entire public life. But it didn't stop there. After his initial detainment, Vitali was transferred to the Bureau of Immigration's detention center in Bicutan, a facility infamous for overcrowding, poor sanitation, and harsh conditions. Known among locals as a modern-day gulag, it was a place many didn't leave for years. It wasn't built for rehabilitation or comfort. It was built for containment. And now, Vitali was trapped inside. Images of him soon surfaced online showing a drastically changed man. He had lost weight, his face looked hollow, his body frail. Gone were the polished muscles and cocky smirks. In their place was a man who looked broken, desperate, and utterly lost. Some speculated that the weight loss came from the jail's notoriously meager meals, just borrowed 20 euros worth of food per day, with no access to supplements or enhancements. Others believed it was withdrawal from performance-enhancing drugs or sheer psychological collapse. Either way, the transformation was haunting. His mugshot was no longer meme material, it was a warning, and yet the punishment had only just begun. Legal experts warned that if convicted on all counts, Vitali could face up to 24 years in prison. The most serious charge, attempted grand theft of a motorcycle, alone carried a potential sentence of 20 years, and with everything broadcasted in HD to thousands online, there was an overwhelming amount of self-incriminating evidence. Ironically, the very audience Vitali was performing for could now become the reason he'd be locked away for decades. But even without a conviction, the suffering had already begun. As a foreign national awaiting trial, he was not granted bail and was placed in immigration detention with no guaranteed timeline for release. And in the Philippines, the legal process is notoriously slow. Court systems are overwhelmed with backlogs, meaning even a single trial can drag on for years. Secretary Abalos himself stated that Vitali could remain in the detention center for 2 to 3 years, just waiting for trial. Not serving a sentence, just waiting. He wasn't allowed to vlog. He wasn't given access to any special resources. The government made it clear: no air conditioning, no personal privileges, and no content creation. He was just another detainee, one of thousands, living in crowded cells with shared bathrooms, sweltering heat, and minimal food. A man who once flew first class, surrounded by fans and flashing cameras, now reduced to surviving off bread, rice, and borrowed slippers. As public outrage boiled, Vitali attempted to shift the narrative. In late May 2025, he wrote a handwritten letter to Secretary Abalos pleading for forgiveness, citing mental health issues and promising that he was a changed man. His legal team soon followed up with interviews claiming he had found faith behind bars, was attending daily devotions, and had broken down in tears during visitation. "He's suffering," one lawyer said. "He's truly remorseful," but the internet wasn't buying it. After more than a decade of excuses, manipulations, and strategic apologies, Vitali's sudden spiritual awakening felt more like a last-ditch attempt to gain sympathy than a genuine transformation. The comments were brutal. He's only sorry now because he's finally facing real consequences. Let God forgive him, but let the law do its job. Even the Filipino public, known globally for their warmth and forgiveness, drew a hard line. Many praised the government's stance, saying Vitali needed to learn that influence doesn't mean immunity. And to drive the point home, new legislation was proposed, requiring streamers and vloggers to obtain consent before recording bystanders and to blur the faces of anyone filmed without permission. The Vitali laws, as some began calling them online, were a direct response to his actions. For the first time in his career, Vitali's influence wasn't shaping trends, it was writing laws. And as his story dominated global headlines, it became clear this wasn't just the end of a YouTuber's career, this was the collapse of a man who had built his entire life on escaping accountability, finally caught in the gravity of his own choices. He wanted to go viral, and now he had, just not the way he planned. Vitali's rise and fall isn't just another cautionary tale of a YouTuber gone wrong. It's a chilling reminder of the devastating price paid when chasing clicks becomes an obsession. He spent years exploiting tragedy, provoking outrage, and believing he was untouchable. But fame built on chaos never lasts. In the end, Vitali lost everything: his career, his reputation, and ultimately, his freedom. As he sits in a foreign jail, abandoned and forgotten by the platforms that once fueled his ego, Vitali's story leaves us with a powerful question. In the pursuit of views, fame, and fortune, how far is too far? And for those tempted to follow in his footsteps, the answer might just determine whether they rise to fame or fall spectacularly, just like Vitali.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to Stars and Hypes so you don't miss what's coming next. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how things will continue. Drop them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, take care and have a great day.